You know I have really good credentials when you see this shit. You start hearing this shit rattle. Ooh, it's gonna be a good one. So a few months ago, I went to lunch with my friend Zom. They asked me mid-meal if I could make Jabber's MANKIRA for them, so obviously I said yes, because why the fuck wouldn't I, right? I mean, look at me, like, obviously, I would love to do that. Like, I hope I've made myself clear. I hope I've made myself clear. I really hope I've made myself clear. Obviously, I would love to do that. So I said yes, because obviously I would say yes to that, duh. But the thing is, I've never made foam rings before, so we just honestly figured it out as we went. But I think it came out pretty good. I would say you can be the judge of it. Here's Zom's video on the side if I can figure out how to edit it. This is also my first video, can you tell? So this is gonna be a walkthrough of what I did. I'm not gonna call it a tutorial because I don't know what I'm doing, and I never have. I never have, but you can follow what I did and hopefully iterate on it, do something better. If you do actually use this to your benefit, let me know, comment, at me, literally everything. All of my socials are at Plutolotl, spelled the same way as my channel name. While I was at MomoCon, a Rudo came up to me like with his 3R and was like, oh my god, your tutorial helped so much. I'm like, oh my god, that's beautiful. I would love to have that experience again. Let me know, but onward with the video. Alright, now we're in voiceover mode, so let's talk about it. First up, I asked Zom to send me the circumference and length of each phalange in their hand so I could pattern everything. They sent me a diagram that made things super easy, so I used that to draft up a pattern on some paper. I'm using lined paper because I bought way too much multiple years ago and I don't believe in wasting perfectly good items. Like, you don't need lined paper, just use what you have. I pulled the pattern together by creating a rectangle with the measurements of a section for the height and length, but I added a few millimeters to each dimension to accommodate the foam that I was using. I knew that I wanted to use super thin foam, so I added about 3 millimeters to each side. If I hadn't done that, everything would have been just like a touch too small. I cut out the rectangle and folded it in half so I had a good midpoint for the second part of this process. I had a reference up in front of me and drew the shape of half of a ring, then cut it out while folded so the shape was mirrored on the other side. From here, I traced my patterns onto 2mm EVA foam and cut each piece out with a sharpened box cutter. You would be seeing footage of me doing that if I had it, but my phone must have run out of storage without me noticing because it's literally nowhere to be found. I love it here. Anyway, the pieces got glued together into ring shapes using contact cement, and before adding anything else, I brought the rings for Zom to try on. Most of them were perfect, but there were a few that were just a little bit too snug, so I used a rotary tool to thin them out a little bit. While I had my rotary tool set up out, I used it to lightly bevel the edges of every ring to better match how they look in the manga. I also used some 220 grit sandpaper to lightly buff everything and make sure the rings were as smooth as possible. That would be where construction stopped if I wasn't a stickler about having props interact with the human body in the same way that they interact with the character that uses it, but if I wasn't a stickler about it, my props wouldn't look as cool. In both the anime and the manga, the movements of Jabber's fingers are super exaggerated because of the dramatic overlap of each ring. My way of mimicking this look was adding a layer of foam to the top of each ring. The rings that sat at the bottom of each finger did not have a layer added, while the rings for the middle of each finger had a layer of 6mm foam, and the rings on each fingertip got a layer of 10mm foam. They were all dremeled and detailed just like the base rings were. I also used my wider sanding drum to thin out the underside of each ring and ensure that the hand would have full mobility. Next up were the claws at the end of each finger. I freehanded a pattern and cut it out of 10mm foam. Each claw got a beveled edge using my rotary tool. Before I attached the claws to the rings, though, I wanted to make sure that everything would be stable. That's where the sticks come in. I just used some kitchen bamboo skewers for this step. I marked a small portion, cut it along the line, and used a small head from my rotary tool to etch a deep line into the tip of each claw, and then I used super glue to glue the stick in. This made the tip of each claw super stable and unlikely to flex or break off. We're not done with the skewers. I wanted to make sure the connection between the claw and the rings was as secure as possible, so I took a lesson from my carpentry days and made a dowel joint. In woodworking, this is when you have a small wooden cylinder and a piece of wood, and you drill a hole in the other side before using wood glue on both surfaces to give your pieces a physical and a chemical connection. I'm doing the exact same thing here. My dowel in this case is another piece of a skewer. I just drilled a hole using the same tiny bit on my rotary tool as before, and I glued a stick into one side using super glue. Once the skewer was secure in one side, I used contact cement on the foam around it to reinforce the connection and make sure the rings and claws were never going to come apart. I tried on one set of rings to make sure you could still move your finger with them on, and once I decided it was good, I moved on to cleanup. Cleanup for this prop was just a lot of caulking. I used it on the seams of the ring and to ensure that the skewer at the tip of each claw was hidden away. After everything dried off, I ran over it with another sanding sponge to make sure there weren't any weird raised spots. After that, it was time to prime. For smaller props like this, I like to use Flex Bond. It's a flexible brush-on coating originally meant for Warbler, but it works just fine on EVA foam. When using Flex Bond, I work with gesso rules. You start off with a watery coat, use less water with each one, and then use pure primer for your last coat. Once everything's smooth, I moved on to painting. I wanted to make sure putting on the rings would be quick and easy, so I color-coded each finger by painting the inside of each ring. The colors would only be visible to Zom, so I didn't pay it too much mind. What I did pay a good amount of attention to was the outside of each ring. I mixed a custom metallic magenta color for each ring and used a good-looking silver for each claw. After I finished, I didn't like how flat the claws looked with silver all over, so I went back and only painted the edge using a lighter silver. Once I liked how everything looked, I painted over everything with a clear coat. I used a coat of Createx Gloss Top Coat. It's meant to be used with an airbrush, but as long as you have soft enough bristles and a light hand, it works just fine with a regular brush. I let everything air dry, handed it off to Zom, and that's it. That is how I made Jabber's Mankira for my lovely friend Zom. Thank you to Zom for letting me do this. It was really fun. Also an excuse to do something that I probably wouldn't outside of a commission. That's my favorite part of commissions, honestly. So that being said, it was really dope. Remember to follow Zom right here. Lovely, lovely cosplay, lovely stuff. And if you did enjoy this video and you want to see more, maybe feel free to subscribe. Hopefully there will be more videos coming relatively soon. I've got Amo's boots in the making. I've also got a couple of more niche anime props coming. If you remember D. Gray Man, I've been rewatching D. Gray Man. I'm gonna make something from D. Gray Man. Bonus points if you can guess what I'm gonna make. I think it might be easy, depending on if you can catch my vibe. I'm very obvious with who my favorite character would be. I'll keep it at that. But that being said, thank you and goodbye.